I never thought I'd find myself in this position, but here I am, bare and vulnerable, sharing my story. My name is Kyle, and I was married to Amanda for over a decade. We had what I thought was a strong marriage, built on love, trust, and mutual respect. We had two kids, Jake and Lily. Life was good, or so I thought. Lately, though, I had felt a shift in our relationship. Amanda, once attentive and affectionate, began to act distant. It started with small things. She would come home later than usual, often claiming she was busy with work. I even let it slide when she started to take her phone everywhere, which was unusual for her. But the red flags grew too hard to ignore. I noticed she was less interested in family dinners, and her laughter rarely echoed through our home anymore. An uneasy feeling settled in my gut, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was just a phase. Things took a turn when I overheard a conversation between Jake and his friend, who happens to be the son of Amanda's best friend, Lisa. They were talking about how cool it was that their dads were friends and how Jake's dad was always nice to Lisa. I found it odd, considering I had never met Lisa's husband. I asked Amanda about it, and she gave me a vague response, saying he was an old college buddy but that he had his issues. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time, but later, after some late-night scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a photo that sent chills down my spine. It was a picture of Amanda and Lisa's husband, Tom, at a local bar, looking more than just friendly. The caption read, "Last night out with my favorite lady." My heart dropped. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started paying closer attention to Amanda's behavior, whether it was immediate changes in her schedule or how she defended herself when I asked about her evenings. One evening, I decided to confront her. I had gathered enough courage to bring it up after noticing an unfamiliar scent of cologne lingered on her clothes. My heart raced as I asked her about the photo. Her reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she stammered through a collection of excuses. "Oh, Kyle, it was just a friendly night out. You know how Lisa is. She gets us out to unwind sometimes." I wanted to scream, to shake her and demand the truth, but I felt paralyzed. Instead, I pressed further, asking her point-blank if there was anything more going on. Her response was a mix of denial and anger as she threw accusations back at me, claiming I was paranoid and insecure. As she rambled on about my shortcomings, I felt a wave of anger rise within me. This was it. I was facing my worst fear head-on. I looked at her, searching for any hint of remorse or honesty, but all I saw was a wall of defensiveness. My stomach knotted as I realized, deep down, I was likely right. As the hours passed that night, the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt betrayed, crushed under the weight of her lies, and worst of all, I felt utterly helpless. I spent the following days in a daze, oscillating between disbelief and fury. Every time I glanced at her, I was reminded of the betrayal, and every smile she offered felt like a dagger in my chest. I didn't want to confront her again because I feared the truth it might reveal. Instead, I decided to gather evidence. If she was cheating, I needed proof. I started following her discreetly. It was uncomfortable, but my gut instincts didn't lie. Sunday evenings became her favorite time to run errands, and each time she left, I felt sick to my stomach. The thrill of finding the truth became an obsession. I knew I was spiraling, but it was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. I had to know the truth. At this point, I was teetering on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump or find a way back to solid ground. My heart felt like lead, and I couldn't shake the thoughts of revenge that entered my mind. Slowly, the idea of exposing her became a comforting thought, something to cling to in my despair. I remember the day so vividly when I finally decided to catch her in the act. I'd been gathering all the pieces and was ready to confront the truth. Little did I know that my plans were about to spiral into a chaos I never anticipated. What I would do next would change everything. I spent the next few days preparing for my confrontation with Amanda. It was beyond infuriating to live in the same house with her, pretending everything was normal. I could sense her feigned cheerfulness, the way she would laugh a little too hard at my jokes, as if trying to convince not just me but herself that everything was fine. But underneath that facade, I was scheming, gathering my thoughts and honing my resolve. The pivotal moment came on a Friday night. I had noticed that Amanda had planned another of her errands for that evening, and this time I was determined to catch her red-handed. I had set up a hidden camera in the garage where she often made phone calls. I had a gut feeling that this would finally reveal the truth. Just as I expected, Amanda left around 7 p.m. I tried to appear nonchalant as I sat on the couch, waiting for the inevitable. My heart was pounding, and a mix of excitement and dread coursed through my veins. I couldn't deny the thrill of finally having the opportunity to confront her infidelity head-on. I felt like a detective in one of those crime dramas, piecing together clues that would lead to the big reveal. At around 8 p.m., I heard her pull into the driveway. I quickly turned off the TV and pretended to be engrossed in my phone. I heard her heels clicking on the floor as she entered, and I could almost feel the tension radiating from the air. Amanda walked into the living room and smiled brightly, but I could see the uncertainty behind her eyes. "Hey, babe, I'm back," she said, and I noticed the hint of nervousness in her voice. "Did you miss me?" "Of course," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "How was your errand?" She launched into a story about how there were delays at the mall and how she ran into an old friend. I could feel my blood boiling as I listened to her half-truths. I had to play it cool. I couldn't let her see my anger just yet. "Sounds like you had a fun time," I said, feigning casual interest. Once she settled down, I suggested we watch a movie together. As we sat on the couch, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of dread and anticipation. I knew that the real drama was yet to unfold. That night, I reviewed the footage I had captured. My heart raced as I pressed play. The recording began with Amanda outside, talking animatedly on her phone. I leaned in closer, straining to hear her words. "Yeah, I can't wait to see you," she said, her voice soft and flirtatious. "I miss you so much. I can't believe we've been sneaking around for this long." My stomach turned. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The realization hit me hard. She was indeed having an affair, and not just with any random guy. It was with Tom, Lisa's husband, who I had never met but had heard so much about. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my back. As I continued to listen, the weight of her words came crashing down as she described the special moments they shared. She talked about their rendezvous, how exhilarating it felt to sneak around, and she even had the audacity to say she felt more alive than she did with me. Each word felt like a betrayal, and I could feel hot tears welling in my eyes. This was not just infidelity, it was a complete disregard for the life we built together, our children, our home. I paused the video, my hands shaking. I felt a surge of anger that was palpable, almost suffocating. I needed to confront her, but I wanted to do it when I had my emotions in check, not in a fit of rage. The next day, I made a plan. I would confront Amanda publicly. I wanted to expose her, not just to me, but to the people she had deceived and manipulated. I couldn't keep this secret any longer. The thought of her walking around town with her head held high, pretending nothing was wrong while I suffered in silence, was unbearable. I decided the best way to do this would be to gather some friends for a weekend barbecue. I would invite Lisa, and I knew that her presence would be the catalyst for my revelation. I spent the day preparing, my nerves buzzing with both excitement and anxiety. I knew the moment I revealed the truth, our lives would shatter, but I felt empowered by the thought that I could finally take control of the chaos that had overtaken my life. When the day of the barbecue arrived, I put on my best face and greeted our friends as they arrived. Amanda was in a good mood, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. I couldn't help but admire her beauty, even in my anger. She wore a sundress that hugged her figure perfectly, her hair cascading down her back as she laughed with our friends. I casually chatted with everyone, but my eyes kept darting to the entrance, waiting for Lisa to arrive. I felt a rush when I saw her walk in, her expression friendly as she greeted Amanda and then me. I steeled myself, preparing for what I would do next. As the barbecue progressed and the food was served, I finally decided it was time. I stood up, clinking my glass to get everyone's attention. "Hey, everyone. I'd like to say a few words," I began, my voice steady despite the anxiety churning in my stomach. Thank you all for coming together today. It means a lot to see all of us in one place. I looked at Amanda, whose smile faded slightly as she sensed my serious tone. But there's something I need to address that has been eating away at me. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. Amanda has been having an affair with Tom, Lisa's husband. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Gasps filled the space, and I could feel Amanda's eyes widen in shock. I looked around at our friends who were staring at me in disbelief. I have proof, I continued, the adrenaline surging through me. I caught them on camera, talking about how they've been sneaking around, how alive she feels with him. The murmurs erupted, and I could see Amanda starting to panic. I had no idea how this would play out, but I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction as I watched her world begin to crumble around her. This was only the beginning. The moment I exposed Amanda's affair felt surreal. Time seemed to slow down as the realization of what I had just done rippled through the crowd. I watched as her face went from shock to anger, and then to something I couldn't quite place, maybe fear. The bustling chatter of our friends faded into a dull roar in my ears, and every eye in the backyard turned toward her. For a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with, a woman who could smile and laugh with such warmth. But now, all I saw was the betrayal that had taken root beneath that surface. Amanda's mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water, searching for the words to defend herself against the onslaught of disgrace that I had unleashed. "What the hell, Kyle?" she finally exclaimed, her voice dripping with venom. "You can't just say that in front of everyone. This is insane." I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through me. I had finally turned the tables. I was no longer the victim of her deceit. The initial shock rippled through our friends. Some were whispering amongst themselves, while others looked outright horrified. It was a chaotic scene, and I relished every second of it. "Insane," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "What's insane is that you thought you could get away with this, living a double life, and throwing our family away for some thrills with your best friend." Husband, Lisa's face was a mix of disbelief and anger. "Tom, is this true?" she demanded as she turned to Amanda, her voice rising. Amanda was cornered now, her bravado crumbling. I can explain," she stammered. "It's not what you think. Tom and I were just what?" I interjected, my voice rising. "Just having fun behind the backs of your friends and family. Do you think this is a game? I have video proof, Amanda. You admitted to sneaking around." I felt powerful, but beneath that power was a pang of sadness. Here I was, exposing the woman I once loved, the mother of my children, to our friends. I had imagined this moment differently, but life had a way of twisting expectations. Amanda's composure began to break as she tried to regain control of the situation. "You're ruining everything. You'll regret this," she shouted, her eyes flashing with anger. "No, Amanda, you are ruining everything," I shot back, my voice laced with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. "This is your doing. You chose to betray our family, our marriage." At this point, I could see some of our friends beginning to back away, unsure of how to react. Discomfort filled the air, but I pressed on, fueled by my desire for justice. Amanda, however, was not done fighting. "Everyone, please, you have to understand. This is all a misunderstanding," she pleaded, her desperation evident. "Kyle is just upset and saying things that aren't true." "Upset? You're calling my words a lie. Your actions are the truth," I replied, pointing a finger at her. "You're the one who should be ashamed." With that, I turned to the crowd. "I'm sorry this has to be like this, but I refuse to let her manipulate the narrative any longer. I refuse to pretend everything is fine. She's been cheating on me for months, and I'm here to make sure everyone knows the truth." There was a palpable tension in the air. Some of our friends seemed to side with Amanda, while others were clearly on my side, nodding in support. Lisa stood there, her eyes welling with tears and disbelief, and I felt a pang of sympathy. This was her husband, too, and she deserved better than to be dragged into this mess. The barbecue turned into an emotionally charged battleground. Amanda, now visibly upset, threw her hands up in frustration. "You're making this a public spectacle, Kyle. You're being vindictive." "Maybe I am," I snapped back. "But you made your choice, and I'm not going to let you walk away unscathed. You took everything from me. This is the least you deserve." I sensed that the tide was turning. Friends were starting to step away from Amanda, murmuring amongst themselves. I watched as some began to comfort Lisa, who looked utterly shattered. It was a moment of reckoning for Amanda, and I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction that she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. But even as I reveled in this fleeting victory, I couldn't shake the feeling of loss that washed over me. I had destroyed my family's reputation in front of our friends, and I knew what this would mean for our children. They would be the ones to suffer the fallout from this mess. As the chaos continued to unfold around us, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Was this really the right way to handle things? Did I want to be the villain in my own story? The evening wore on, and I realized that while I might have exposed her infidelity, I had also unleashed a storm that would tear through our lives. As our guests began to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had opened a Pandora's box that I wouldn't easily close. But Amanda's fate was sealed. She had brought this upon herself, and now she would face the music. As I stood in the aftermath of what I had done, I felt both empowered and deeply unsettled. What would happen next? How would I navigate the fallout? The consequences of my actions were just beginning to unfold. The days following the barbecue felt like a whirlwind. The aftermath of my confrontation with Amanda left a gaping wound in our family, and I was still trying to process everything that had happened. I had exposed her affair in front of our friends, thinking it would liberate me, but instead it seemed to suffocate me. The next morning, the house felt empty. The silence echoed through the walls, amplifying the tension between us. Amanda was a shell of her former self. She walked around in a daze, her face drawn and pale. I had expected her to fight back, to plead her case, but instead, she withdrew into herself, and I found myself grappling with guilt for what I had done. As I prepared breakfast for Jake and Lily, I could feel their innocent eyes watching us, sensing the tension in the air. They didn't understand what was happening, and I dreaded the day I would have to explain everything to them. I knew the whispers would start soon at school, and I felt a knot form in my stomach at the thought of them being bullied because of our mess. When Amanda finally sat down at the table, she picked at her food, not really eating anything. "The kids need to know," she finally said, breaking the silence. I looked at her, surprised. "You want to tell them?" She nodded, her gaze unwavering. "They deserve to hear it from us, not from other people." I agreed, but the thought of the conversation petrified me. How do you explain to your children that their mother was unfaithful, that all the love and stability they knew was now in question? I felt an overwhelming surge of protectiveness toward them. They were innocent victims in all of this. After breakfast, we gathered the kids in the living room. Jake was 10 and Lily was 8. They were old enough to understand more than we wanted them to. I could see the worry etched on Amanda's face as we sat them down, and my heart raced. "Kids, we need to talk," I started, my voice breaking slightly. I glanced at Amanda, who took a deep breath and nodded for me to go ahead. "We love you both very much," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "But there's something important we need to share." I felt Amanda tense beside me. "There's been some trouble between your dad and me," she started, her voice wavering. "I made some mistakes, and I want you to know that none of this is your fault." I watched their faces transform from curiosity to confusion, and I felt a deep ache in my chest. Jake's brow furrowed as he asked, "What kind of mistakes, Mom?" Amanda hesitated, and I knew I had to step in. "Mom has been seeing someone else. It's someone she shouldn't have been seeing." The words hung heavily in the air. I could see Jake's face turn pale and Lily's eyes widen with disbelief. "Is that true?" Jake asked, looking directly at Amanda as if searching for reassurance. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I messed up and I'm going to take responsibility for it." "What about us? What does this mean?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to remain composed for their sake. "Means things are going to change, but we're still your parents and we both love you very much. We're going to work through this together." Jake's eyes filled with tears and he turned to me, his voice small. "Will we still be a family?" It felt like a dagger to my heart. "We're going to try our best to make it work," I replied, unsure of whether I truly believed it. "But it's going to take time." The kids were quiet, processing the news. Amanda sat there sobbing, and I felt a mix of anger and sorrow. I had wanted to protect our children, but instead, we had thrust them into the middle of our chaos. After we finished talking, I took the kids upstairs to their rooms, giving them space to process. I wanted to reassure them, to wrap them in a cocoon of love, but everything felt so fragile. That evening, as I lay in bed, I heard Amanda sobbing in the other room. Her tears echoed through the silence, and I felt a mix of pity and resentment. She had brought this upon herself, yet hearing her cry tugged at my heartstrings. I turned away, wishing I could shut off my emotions, but they were tangled up in a mess of anger and love. Days turned into weeks, and the tension at home was palpable. Our friends had mostly distanced themselves from Amanda, and the whispers at school had indeed begun. Jake came home one day in tears, telling me that some kids at school were making fun of him because of what his mom had done. It broke my heart to hear his sorrow, and I felt the weight of guilt pressing down on my chest. I tried to be strong for the kids, but I was exhausted, emotionally drained from the turmoil. I had sought revenge, but now I was left with the aftermath, a broken family and a wounded heart. Amanda and I rarely spoke about the affair directly, and the conversations we had were filled with tension and unresolved feelings. One night, as I lay awake, I realized that I was at a crossroads. Holding onto the anger and resentment was tearing me apart, but forgiving Amanda felt impossible. I knew that if we were ever going to heal, I had to make a choice. I could either fight for our family or cut ties and move on. It was a decision I didn't take lightly. The affair had shattered my trust, and the thought of rebuilding what we once had felt daunting. But I also recognized that for the sake of our children, we needed to find a way back to each other, even if it meant starting from scratch. As I drifted off to sleep, I made a silent promise to myself to confront the pain, to seek healing not just for me but for Amanda and our children. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I had to decide whether to forgive or to walk away, and that decision would shape the rest of our lives. The days turned into weeks, and I found myself in a constant battle between anger and forgiveness. The emotional roller coaster was exhausting, and I felt like I was losing myself in the chaos of our lives. The kids were adjusting to the new normal, but the tension in our home was palpable. Amanda and I rarely spoke, and when we did, it was usually about the children or the logistics of our day-to-day lives. I knew I had to decide what I wanted for us. Did I want to try to rebuild our marriage, or was it time to end things for good? I started reaching out to friends for advice, seeking the perspective of those who had been in similar situations. Some urged me to fight for my marriage, believing that with time and effort, we could heal. Others, however, told me to cut my losses and move on, emphasizing that trust was something that could rarely be rebuilt once broken. One night, I mustered enough courage to sit down with Amanda. We needed to have a heart-to-heart, to clear the air and figure out where stood. As I walked into the living room, I could see the weight of the world on her shoulders. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "Kyle, can we talk?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit down. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on her lap, and I could tell she was nervous. "I know this has been hard for both of us," she began. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize how much I've hurt you and the kids." I crossed my arms, preparing myself to listen but also ready to stand my ground. "What do you want me to say, Amanda? That I'm okay with what you did, that I can just forget it and move on?" Tears filled her eyes, and I felt a pang of sympathy, but I quickly pushed it aside. "I don't want to rehash the past. I want to know if you understand the damage you've done," I said, my voice firm but controlled. "I do," she replied, sniffling as she wiped her eyes. "I can't even begin to express how sorry I am for betraying your trust. I was selfish, and I know that. I let my insecurities get the better of me. I want to fix this, Kyle. I want to work on our marriage." I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anger and sadness swirl within me. "And what does that mean? How do we move forward from here?" "I think we need to go to counseling," she suggested. "We need to address the issues that led to my choices. I love you and I want to fight for us. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try." Her words echoed in my mind, and I felt a flicker of hope mixed with deep skepticism. I wanted to believe her, but the scars were still fresh, and I was terrified of being hurt again. Do you think counseling will really change anything? I asked, my voice laced with doubt. It's a start, Amanda answered earnestly. I want to understand why I did what I did. I want to be a better wife, a better mother. I can't change the past, but I'm desperate to work on my future with you. I sat in silence, contemplating her words. The thought of going to therapy felt like a glimmer of light in a dark tunnel, but the fear of being vulnerable again gnawed at me. I wanted to protect myself, to guard my heart against any further pain. But then again, I also didn't want to throw away the life we had built together without trying. Okay, I finally said, my voice steady. I'm willing to give it a shot, but it's going to take time. I need to see genuine effort from you. I can't promise that everything will go back to how it was, but I'm willing to try. Amanda nodded fervently, relief washing over her face. Thank you, Kyle. I won't let you down. I promise to put in the work. I know I've burned a lot of bridges, but I want to rebuild what we had. As we began to navigate this difficult path together, I could feel the weight of our situation beginning to shift. We set up our first counseling session for the following week, and while I was apprehensive, I also felt a sense of hope. The process wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary if we had any chance of salvaging our marriage. The first therapy session was awkward, to say the least. We sat in the waiting room, Amanda tapping her foot nervously while I tried to keep my mind clear of negative thoughts. When we finally entered the counselor's office, I was struck by how cozy and inviting it felt. It was a stark contrast to the tension that had characterized our home for weeks. The therapist, Dr. Simmons, greeted us warmly and guided us through the initial steps of the session. Let's start by discussing why you're here today, she said, her tone gentle yet authoritative. I glanced at Amanda, who looked more vulnerable than I had ever seen her. I think we both know why we're here, I said, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. She had an affair, and I'm trying to figure out if I can forgive her. Dr. Simmons nodded, taking notes as she glanced between us. And Amanda, how do you feel about that? I feel awful, she replied, her voice cracking. I know. I've betrayed Kyle, and I want to take responsibility for my actions. But I also want him to know that I want to change and that I understand the gravity of what I did. The session continued, and we began to peel back the layers of our relationship. We discussed the cracks that had formed before the affair, the communication breakdowns, and the way life had swept us along. Each revelation felt both liberating and painful, and I found myself grappling with a mix of resentment and understanding. Over the following weeks, we attended therapy regularly, and while it was challenging, I found that I was beginning to understand Amanda on a deeper level. Her insecurities, which had driven her to seek validation elsewhere, became clearer. Slowly, I realized that her actions, while unforgivable, stemmed from her own struggles, struggles I had inadvertently ignored in my pursuit of our family's happiness. As the sessions progressed, I began to soften, allowing myself to consider the possibility of rebuilding our trust. It was not an easy process, and there were days when the weight of the past felt too heavy to bear. However, in those moments, I clung to the glimmers of hope that emerged from our conversations, hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. With each passing day, I found myself reflecting on my own feelings, examining the anger and resentment that had consumed me. I realized that while I had every right to feel betrayed, I also needed to let go of the need to punish Amanda for her mistakes. I had to choose resilience over bitterness if I wanted to create a future for our family. But just as I started to feel a sense of progress, I received a phone call that shattered the fragile peace we had begun to build. It was Lisa. "Hey, Kyle, can we talk?" she said, her voice shaky. I felt my stomach drop. "What's going on?" "I think you should know that Tom has been acting really strange lately. I found messages on his phone that, well, you need to hear this in person. Can we meet?" My heart raced at the thought of what she might reveal. I needed to know, but I also knew that whatever this was could threaten everything we had been working toward. "Okay, let's meet," I agreed, my mind racing with the implications of her words. As I prepared to meet Lisa, I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't over. I had fought so hard to find a path toward healing, but it seemed like another wave was about to crash down on me. How much more could I take? The meeting with Lisa would change everything once again. As I drove to meet Lisa, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I couldn't shake the feeling that the fragile progress Amanda and I had made was on the brink of collapse. The drive felt like it took an eternity. I was anxious about what Lisa might reveal. The implications of her words loomed over me like a dark cloud, threatening to rain down more chaos on my already tumultuous life. When I arrived at the cafe where we agreed to meet, I spotted Lisa sitting at a table in the corner, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup, her face pale and drawn. She looked up as I approached, and I could see the worry etched on her features. I took a seat across from her, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know who else to turn to. "Just tell me what's going on," I urged, trying to keep my tone steady. Lisa took a deep breath, visibly struggling with her words. "I found some messages on Tom's phone," she began, her eyes welling with tears. "They're not just flirty texts, they're about you, Kyle." My heart sank and I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean? What did he say?" She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "He said he was going to make sure to keep you distracted, that you wouldn't see it coming. He mentioned something about a plan and Amanda." The room seemed to spin around me as I processed her words. It felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. "What kind of plan?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know all the details," she admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But it sounded like he was trying to manipulate the situation, maybe even get you to question your marriage further. It's like he was trying to drive a wedge between you and Amanda." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. I couldn't wrap my head around what Lisa was saying. The idea that Tom was not only having an affair with my wife but was also plotting against me felt surreal. My anger towards Amanda began to morph into a deeper fury directed at Tom. "Why would he do that?" I asked, my mind racing. "What does he gain from this?" "I don't know," Lisa replied, her voice shaky. "But Kyle, you need to talk to Amanda. You need to figure out what's really going on." I felt a surge of determination wash over me. I wasn't going to let anyone manipulate my life any longer. "Thank you for telling me this, Lisa," I said, my voice firm. "I need to confront Amanda and find out what she knows." As I made my way back home, my thoughts raced. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, with so much hanging in the balance. I had already exposed Amanda's affair in front of our friends, and now I was faced with the possibility that Tom had been orchestrating the chaos that had ensued. When I got home, I found Amanda in the living room, sitting on the couch, her eyes darting nervously as I walked in. I could see the tension in her posture. "Hey, how did it go?" she asked, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "We need to talk," I said, my tone serious. Her expression shifted and she looked apprehensive. "About what?" "I met with Lisa," I said, watching her closely. "She found messages on Tom's phone. He's been plotting against me, Amanda. He mentioned something about keeping me distracted and manipulating the situation between us." The color drained from her face as she absorbed my words. "What? That's insane," she stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Insane or not, it means that this whole mess is deeper than we thought," I pressed, my voice firm. "You need to be honest with me. What do you know?" Amanda looked crushed, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "I swear, I didn't know about any of this. Tom and it was a mistake. I never expected this to happen." I took a step closer, trying to control my anger. "You need to tell me everything, Amanda, now." She took a moment, her breathing shaky as she tried to gather her thoughts. "Tom and I were it started out as flirting and I was feeling so lost. But I didn't know he was planning anything against you. I never thought it would go this far. Why didn't you stop it?" Pressed, feeling my frustration boiling over. "You knew it was wrong." "I know, I was caught up in my own insecurities. I didn't think it would turn into this. I was just trying to escape." Her voice cracked under the weight of her emotions. As I watched her, I felt a mixture of anger and empathy. Despite everything, I could see she was genuinely remorseful. "We need to confront Tom together," I said, my voice steady. "This can't continue. We need to put an end to whatever game he's playing." Amanda nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, Kyle, I promise. I can't let him manipulate our lives any longer. With determination, we made a plan. We would confront Tom together, ready to expose him for the coward he was. The thought of standing united against him brought a sense of clarity to my chaotic emotions. That weekend, we approached Tom and Lisa's house, a mix of anxiety and resolve coursing through me. As we knocked on the door, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. No more hiding, no more games. We were taking control. When Tom answered, the look on his face betrayed a mix of confusion and fear. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes flicking between us. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. "About you and Amanda." Tom's demeanor shifted as he realized we weren't playing around. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, trying to play innocent. I stepped forward, my anger boiling. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been manipulating the situation from the start, and we're done with your games." Amanda stood at my side, her expression fierce. "You're not going to come between our family any longer, Tom. This ends now." The confrontation escalated quickly, and soon it was clear that Tom had no way to defend his actions. As Amanda and I laid out the evidence, his bravado crumbled and he realized he was cornered. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he stammered as we pressed him. "I just wanted to feel alive again." "Your actions have consequences," I shot back, "and you're going to face them." In that moment, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had taken a stand not just for myself, but for my family. I wasn't going to let anyone, especially him, try to tear us apart again. After our confrontation, Amanda and I stood outside, the tension in the air replaced by a sense of relief. "Thank you for standing by me," she said quietly, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "I'm not doing this for you alone," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm doing this for our kids. But you need to keep working on yourself if we're going to make it through this." As we walked back to the car, I felt a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the path to healing. I learned that facing the truth, no matter how painful, was the first step to reclaiming control of my life and my family's future. The betrayal was still raw and the scars would take time to heal, but I was ready to fight for what we had. In the end, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming our lives and finding a way to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. I knew the journey ahead would be long, but I was willing to take each step with Amanda, side by side, as we forged a new path together. We had survived the storm, and now it was time to rebuild.